Good evening. We're glad that you could join us this evening for our Midweek Lenten Service. Tonight we're talking about Jesus as a sight giver as we look at our sermon series, Who Do You Say I Am? And just a couple of announcements. One thing for sure is that we want to let you know that we are praying for all of you. We hope that you are praying for us as well as we navigate these waters and just try some new things and worship God right now in the best way that we can. So let's continue our service with Hold an Evening Prayer.
Jesus Christ, you are the light of the world, the light no darkness can overcome. Stay with us now, for it is evening, and the day prayers come before you, O God, as incense. And may your presence surround and fill us, so that in union with all creation, we might sing your praise and your love in our lives. Amen.
Good evening again. We continue our Lenten series with our sermon series, Who Do You Say I Am? And tonight we're going to talk about Jesus being our sight giver. And in John 9, verse 35, it says this: Jesus heard that they had driven him out, this is a blind man, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" This is an important question, and I believe it is really the crux of what this whole chapter 9 is about when we talk about the blind man. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Because while the blind man was given his physical sight back, Jesus took and mixed some mud up and he rubbed it on his eyes. And when he rubbed it on his eyes, he told him to go wash in the pool of Siloam and then to present himself to the priest. And that's what the blind man did. So he received his physical sight. But I believe that a big piece of this chapter is about receiving spiritual sight. In fact, the prophet Isaiah spoke about receiving sight in Isaiah 42, verses 6 and 7. It says this: I am the Lord, I have called you in righteousness. I have taken you by the hand and kept you. I have given you as a covenant to the people, a light to the nations, to open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners from the dungeon, from the prison those who sit in darkness. You see, I think that last line, from the prison those who sit in darkness, speaks to our spiritual blindness and our need of spiritual sight. Throughout this chapter, there are different people who really present themselves looking at the blind man and how he receives his sight, looking at Jesus, really just the ones who are spiritually blind, who need to be opened up to who the Son of God really is. So first we're going to take a look at the disciples. And it says this: as he walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Now, these disciples called by Jesus are really living out what their title is, disciples. Because disciples really look to the rabbi, the teacher, to teach them the things that they don't know. And so as if they're in a classroom going, "Wait, rabbi," they're asking these questions, and for them, and in tradition, they're asking the right kinds of questions. Because for the Jewish people, it was that if someone was inflicted with something like blindness, it was because of sin. So the disciples really are asking out of their tradition, they're asking out of their old ways of thinking. But the fact that Jesus came as our sight giver would say this to us in Isaiah 42, verse 9. "See, the former things have come to pass, and new things I now declare." Traditions for Jesus were the old ways of being, and Jesus is coming to teach them new ways of being. And so the disciples are having to ask these questions. They're having to confront their spiritual blindness so that they might see and that Jesus might teach them what are the new ways of seeing things like blindness or coronavirus or all of the other things that impact us in this world, and how we look at them as well. And as it says in the other frame there, old ways won't open new doors. So Jesus is really working with the disciples, and they are asking questions to learn these new ways. Unfortunately, the disciples don't always get it, but they're trying. Another group are the people, the neighbors, those around the blind man. It says this: the neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it is someone like him." And he kept saying, "I am the man." But they kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened. You see, the people are speaking out of their kind of day-to-day lives. Here's this beggar that's been there, that they see every day, and in fact, quite honestly, probably have gotten to take for granted. And they're just walking by him. They don't even really see him anymore. They remember him from the past and who he was, and they remember his parents and all of those kinds of things, and they know he's blind. But even though he's there day to day, they walk by and they make assumptions about him because they don't really see him. You see, in our spiritual blindness, sometimes we walk by people who are so desperate to be seen. That's what Jesus does. Jesus doesn't hesitate to walk up to the blind man and to heal him of his blindness, his physical blindness. And so you see, the people are confused. They're confused because what they remember is a man that was sitting on the sidewalk that's begging this guy that they walked by. So they're just in this state of confusion, and they don't really know and are asking the question, so who is this? So Jesus has come to open the eyes of this man's neighbors and the other people around him who so willingly walked by and took him for granted. And then there are the parents. It says this, they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that he sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. Now here are parents who I'm sure wanted the best for their son. But they too saw him as a beggar. He couldn't make a livelihood because he was blind. He was thought to be unclean because of his blindness. There are so many things that these parents had to deal with along the way. And now they're having to deal with this fact that their son has been healed of his blindness. And so they're afraid. Because you see, the Jews have already said that anyone who declares Jesus to be the Son of God will be punished. Well, they don't want that for themselves. They don't want it for their son, but they really don't know what to do. And so they protect themselves. And they say, you know, he's of age, ask him. They're kind of washing their hands of this, but only out of a state of fear. How often does fear clutch us so that when it's time for us to stand up to something or someone, when it's time for us to speak the truth or speak the truth in love, how often do we cower away in fear? Because that's certainly what these parents are doing. And then we have the Pharisees. And this is what it says about the Pharisees. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. They should be cheering and joy-filled for this man who's been restored to community. They are the leaders of the religious people. They are there to share with people the joy that happens as God enters into their lives, and yet all they're worried about is the law. You see, the Pharisees can't get past the fact that this man has somehow been restored to community. Their job is to make sure that those who are unclean are sent out and away from community. And yet here comes Jesus, who restores this man's sight and brings him in. The other thing, that they're just stuck to the law. And the law says that Jesus worked on the Sabbath. One of the laws is that no kneading could be done on the Sabbath. So they couldn't make bread because bread requires kneading. When Jesus rubbed the mud on that blind man's eyes, he was kneading his eyes. That was a law that he couldn't do that. So not only could he not work on the Sabbath, he wasn't allowed to do that form of work on the Sabbath as well. And yet for Jesus, it wasn't so much that the blind man, that it was the Sabbath day and that he shouldn't do something. What Jesus saw was an opportunity to heal someone. So the spiritual blindness of the Pharisees is that they were stuck to the law. They couldn't see past the law. Jesus was all about love. That's the law that Jesus talks about. Love God, love neighbor as yourself. But they were stuck to these 613 law codes that were really becoming impossible to follow. So I wonder for us, what is it that keeps us spiritually blind? Are we stuck to our traditions in this world, those things that we think are just the way things have to be done, and if they're not done this way, then somehow we're doing an injustice to God? Because I know traditions are good, don't get me wrong, but when traditions take the place of love, then something happens that skews what we're called to do in this world. Or are we confused? Do we look at the world? Do we look at what's going on in the world? I'm certainly confused right now. I will be honest with you I'm perplexed, I'm confused, I'm all of those things. Because day to day we're having to make decisions and having to try to make the right decisions. And so in the midst of having to make the right decisions, we turn to God and we ask other people and we're relying on leaders, and it's hard. And so does that prevent us from spiritually seeing who the Son of Man really is? Or is it fear? Are we just plain out afraid to stand up? Are we afraid to say that yes, Jesus is the Son of God, and that yes, it is Jesus who I'm going to follow no matter what happens to me? Or is it the law? Is it that we're so set in the law that we can't see the gospel? We can't see that Jesus Christ came, lived his life in obedience to God, died, and was raised again for love of people. It wasn't for the law that Jesus died, but it was for the love of people. You and me. That's why Jesus died. For everyone that we come in contact with today, which of course we're not coming in contact with a whole lot of people right now, but for everyone you see in this world, Jesus died for them. And there's one more, the man born blind. It says this: Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him." Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshipped him. You see, the blind man was not only healed of his physical sight, but he was healed of his spiritual sight as well. He was given a new way of seeing life, both in reality and within himself. He was given a new way of seeing God and how God works in this world through Jesus Christ. Jesus is our sight giver for each and every one of us, our spiritual sight giver, who longs for us to see him as he truly is. And to answer this question for ourselves, not only, as our sermon series says, who do you say I am, but this as well: do you believe in the Son of Man? Amen.
The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
Rejoice, O highly favored.
God, source and ground of all goodness and life, give to your people the peace that passes all understanding, and the will to live your gospel of mercy and justice. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
God, remember us in your love and teach us to pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. Let us bless our God, praise and thanks to you. May God Creator bless us and keep us. May Christ be ever light for our lives. May the Spirit of love be our guide and life for all of our days. Go in peace. Serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.